Hi everybody, and thanks for joining us this week on Up in the Air. I'm Hunter Williams.
And I'm Casey LaHecka.
We have plenty to talk about this week. We'll be joined by members of the Weather Risk Management Club later on in the show, and we have a special feature detailing the effects of El Nino and La Nina.
That's right, and of course we have to talk about the snowfall we saw this past weekend over much of the area. Nathan will stop by later with the details on what kind of weather we can expect going forward.
We'll have all that and much more in just a bit, but first, here's Update in the Air.
Floods, hurricanes, wildfires, and other extreme events are becoming more frequent and more intense due to climate change, experts warn. And that's never been more apparent than in 2015. Boston recorded its all-time snowiest winter with 110.6 inches. The 75-foot-high snow pile where snowplows corralled the ice didn't melt until July 14th. Multiple states have broken heat records as 2015 shapes up to be the hottest year on record. Idaho, Oregon, Utah, and Washington all logged their hottest Junes, and Florida recorded its hottest March to May. May was the all-time wettest month ever recorded in the contiguous United States in the 121 years of NOAA's record keeping. Nowhere was the wet weather more extreme than in Texas and Oklahoma, where precipitation totaled more than twice the long-term average. Extreme weather events are becoming more extreme and lasting for longer periods of time, becoming very evident to us in 2015.
According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, we are currently in the midst of the world's third ever global coral bleaching event. This event began back in the summer of 2014 in the North Pacific and has now expanded into the South Pacific and Indian Oceans and is also impacting coral reefs along the United States. As well as currently impacted locations, NOAA estimates that 95% of U.S. coral reefs will have been exposed to ocean conditions suitable for coral bleaching by the end of this year. One state hit especially hard is Hawaii, where this event is the second bleaching event in just 2 years. In August of this year, global average ocean temperatures were the warmest they had ever been for any month since we had begun keeping records in 1880. This is due at least in part to the current El Nino.
Researchers might have finally provided a solution to the ecological riddle of why tree abundance on Africa's grassy savannas diminishes in response to heavy rainfall. The researchers found that the ability of grasses to more efficiently absorb and process water gives them an advantage over trees. This raises concerns that the heavy tropical rains that could accompany climate change may lead to fewer trees on savannas. The researchers found that under very wet conditions, grasses have an advantage because they can quickly absorb water and support high rates of photosynthesis, the process by which plants convert sunlight into energy. Trees, with their tougher leaves and roots, are able to survive better in dry periods because of their ability to withstand water stress. But this amounts to a disadvantage for trees in periods of intense rainfall.
Typhoon Kopu made landfall last Sunday in the Philippines, resulting in days of torrential rain across the northern part of the country. Reports coming out of the area indicate that massive amounts of rainfall have drained out of the higher elevations in the mountains into the lower valleys, resulting in devastating flooding. The storm has resulted in 28 deaths since making landfall. Reports out of Luzon, the main northern island of the Philippines, indicate that over 40 inches of rain have fallen locally due to the storm. Power outages are widespread across the area and an estimated thousands of residents have been displaced. Government officials in the country warn that the flooding threat is not yet over, as areas may see up to 8 more inches of rain before the storm completely leaves the area. We'll be back in a moment with more. We're now joined by members of the Weather Risk Management team, Brady and Josh. Could you guys tell us a little bit more about the current hurricane season?
Thank you for having us tonight, Hunter and Casey. For the 2015 hurricane season, NOAA forecasted a 70% chance of a below-average season. This marked the highest probability of a below-average season NOAA ever forecasted. The hurricane season starts in June and runs through the end of November. As of October 20th, there have been 11 named systems in the Atlantic this year. Although many consider this season to be abnormal, Tropical Storm Anna developed unusually early on May 6th. This season's accumulated cyclonic energy, or ACE, is a value of 55, half of which was Hurricane Joaquin. This value is roughly 65% of the average ACE typically seen this far into the season.
What reasons may be most influencing the current hurricane season?
The strength of this year's El Nino is impacting the 2015 season, but is not the only cause. Wind shear, sea surface temperatures, pressure patterns, and dust are also known variables influencing the season. Wind shear is the most direct impact. Wind shear is a change in wind speed or direction with height, and if too strong, can tear the developing storm apart. Sea surface temperatures were 3 to 4 degrees Celsius cooler than on average for the tropical Atlantic early in the season, the basin where these storms can develop. Linked with the sea surface temperatures are the pressure patterns. This season has been seen with low pressure west of Mexico and high pressure in the Atlantic. The colder water and sinking air from the high pressure make storm production unlikely. The fourth influence is dust, which inhibits a season rather than destroying a season. Dust from the Sahara can either reflect sunlight, preventing it from reaching the ocean, absorb the radiation or air around, and increase cloud coverage over the Atlantic.
What is the outlook for the remaining part of the season?
Historically, October is a month when extremely powerful hurricanes have formed. Gonzalo in 2014, Omar in 2008, Wilma in 2005, Michelle in 2001, and Iris in 2001, to name a few in recent times. Given the strength of El Nino and the wind shear, however, we would expect an early end to this year's hurricane season. Currently, there is a low pressure off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula, but will most likely just produce heavy rains as it moves across the peninsula.
And although this season is considered below average, it does not promise there won't be direct impacts on the United States. Hurricane Andrew in 92 and Hurricane Betsy in 65 are two examples of below average seasons that still manage to be significant in the eyes of the public because of the direct damage. A below average season allows an increase of energy production in the Gulf, decrease in insurance claim payouts, as well as protects lives, promotes tourism, and the fishing industry is not hindered.
As always, thanks guys for coming on the show.
Thank you, Hunter and Casey, for having us on the show this week.
JT and Barbara will be on next week.
Thanks for tuning back in.
We now have a special feature on the effects of El Nino and La Nina. This, of course, is very important to think about with the El Nino that we are currently experiencing.
The El Nino Southern Oscillation, or ENSO, is a sea surface temperature anomaly in the eastern tropical Pacific that has wide-ranging global impacts.
El Nino has made headlines over the years for its impacts on weather in the United States and abroad, so meteorologists and climatologists invest a lot of time in studying and forecasting it.
As global average temperatures continue to rise, understanding the impact of warming on El Nino or La Nina is a hot topic in the scientific community. El Nino and La Nina are tied to tropical cyclone trends, so changes to ENSO could impact tropical cyclone activity across the world.
ENSO has two phases, El Nino and La Nina. During an El Nino, the ocean surface is warmer than average in the tropical Pacific off the western coast of South America. Conversely, during a La Nina, waters are cooler than average.
The phenomenon is closely linked with the Southern Oscillation, which is essentially a seesaw effect of the atmospheric pressure as it builds up on one side of the ocean. This area of increased pressure naturally oscillates between the tropical Indian and the tropical Pacific Oceans.
The asymmetry created by this oscillation leads to a strengthening of the trade winds, which are the prevailing winds in the tropics. These variations in the trade winds drive El Nino and La Nina events.
These two phenomena together is called ENSO, or the El Nino Southern Oscillation.
Under El Nino conditions, tropical cyclone development is typically suppressed in the Atlantic Basin and enhanced in the Pacific Basin. This is because the upper atmospheric patterns associated with El Nino events increase wind shear across the Atlantic and decrease it in the Pacific.
Wind shear is the change in wind speed in direction with height. Tropical cyclones form and thrive in environments with low wind shear. If wind shear is too great, storms can be ripped apart.
Thus, tropical cyclone activity is usually reduced in the Atlantic during an El Nino. The opposite is true of La Nina years, when tropical cyclone activity is typically lower than average in the Pacific Ocean and higher in the Atlantic due to these upper atmospheric patterns.
Current studies indicate that the frequency of El Niño will not be impacted by global warming. As you can see in this figure, the frequency of El Niños and La Niñas does not change with recent warming.
However, El Niños could become stronger, while La Niñas become weaker. As the temperature of the ocean rises, El Niños would be warmer, while La Niñas would be less cool. This could heighten the effects that El Niño has across the world, while diminishing La Niña's effects.
In terms of tropical weather, an increase in sea surface temperatures is predicted by global climate models to decrease the frequency of tropical cyclones around the world, but increase the percentage of cyclones that become intense storms. The reasons why are not well understood, but is most likely due to changes in atmospheric circulations associated with warmer water.
This would affect millions of people living in the tropical basins, which is why it is crucial for scientists to continue to research the impacts of a warming world. For Up in the Air, I'm Brad Gay.
And I'm James Hillwack.
Welcome back to the show.
We were talking earlier about the snow we saw last weekend, but we're now joined by Nathan Flinchbaugh, who is here to tell us what to expect over the next couple weeks.
Thanks, Hunter and Casey. We're now into late October, which means we're experiencing peak color across much of the northeastern United States as far as fall foliage is concerned. Peak color through Maine, much of northern New England into northern New York. Even here in Pennsylvania, the northern tier down through the Laurel Highlands is at peak color right now. The rest of the state generally at high color or moderate color. So if your neighborhood isn't quite at peak color yet, it will come in the next couple of weeks. We had a little bit of a slow start to the fall foliage season because of a warmer than average September, but now we're starting to catch up. In fact, far northern New England is now past peak. Some of those leaves are starting to drop from the trees. Also dropping is our temperatures. October 20th, normal high here in State College is 59. Our average low is about 39, and our mean is 49. Typically in the month of October, we average a little bit over 3 inches of rain. And we also usually pick up about 0.4 inches of snow and ice. This past weekend, we saw our first flurries of the season. Didn't see any measurable snowfall from that, but October is the time of year where we really start to see chances for snow come back into our forecast, at least every now and then. Our drought monitor shows the big story continues out west with the drought in California and Nevada. Also a decent drought going on in Washington and Oregon. I'll show you in the 8 to 14 day outlook, it looks like there may be some relief here in these areas of the Pacific Northwest. Fingers crossed for that. Also a little bit of drought here across southern New England down through Connecticut into the New York area. And here in Pennsylvania, just some spotty drought, primarily across western Pennsylvania. Eastern PA is doing a little bit better though. As far as what we can expect with the upper air pattern, about a week from now we'll be in mainly a zonal flow. I think that's going to be the pattern for the next several days here. Then a ridge will build offshore and a trough will dig in across the Great Lakes and then scoop through the northeast, which will bring some unsettled weather and probably cooler than normal temperatures by the time we get to Halloween. So it looks like it will be cool to start out the month of November. Here's our official temperature outlook from October 28th to November 3rd. Slightly above normal temperatures likely across northeast, State College included, down through portions of the Ohio Valley. Better chance of seeing above normal temperatures in Florida though, and a much better chance of seeing well above normal temperatures across the western United States, stretching across the international border into the northern plains. Moderately above normal in the southwestern deserts through the central Rockies and then on up into the Midwest. And then just slightly above normal from about Chicago down through the Dallas metro area on down to the Mexican border. As far as precipitation is concerned, again from October 28th to November 3rd, well above normal precipitation expected again across the southeastern United States. Not good news. They've seen a lot of rain there so far this month, and they're going to see a little bit more to close out the month. Slightly above normal precipitation expected here in State College and much of the Northeast. Slightly above normal precip also across the western Ohio Valley down the Mississippi River Basin. And as I mentioned earlier, hopefully some relief for these folks out in the Pacific Northwest. Above normal precipitation, well above normal precipitation expected across the coastal sections of the Pacific Northwest. A little bit less dramatic further inland, but unfortunately the beat goes on in California, where the drought is at its worst. It looks like there's no rain coming to that portion of the country to relieve the drought in California. That's all I have. We'll send it back to the desk now to Hunter and Casey.
Thanks, Nathan.
And that's all we have for this week's episode. As always, thanks for joining us.
We'll be back next week with another episode, but for now, I'm Casey Laheka.
And I'm Hunter Williams. We'll see you next week up in the air.